Well, hey guys, you join me here today with this Triumph Spitfire Mk3 FD series engine that I'm going to be stripping apart and rebuilding over the course of the next series of videos and putting into my Triumph Spitfire Mk3, because at the moment my Spitfire has actually got a Mk4 engine in it, so it would be nice to reunite a Mk3 engine in a Mk3 Spitfire. Now my plans with this engine are to keep it somewhat stock, but I would like to do a few things to it to future-proof it. So we're going to take the cylinder head off and send that off for remachining and converting to unleaded. I'd like to replace the rocker shaft with a new rocker shaft, just tighten things up a little bit. With the pistons, I intend on doing an overbore, again just tightening up the engine. And with the crankshaft and the flywheel, I would like to get those balanced, just to make the engine run a little bit more efficiently. With the front of the engine, when these engines come out of the factory, they came out with a simplex timing chain. Now I'd like to upgrade that to a duplex timing chain, just to make it a little bit more stronger. Now unfortunately, since the last time I showed this engine on any of my YouTube videos, which was the Rule of 9 video, my most popular video on my YouTube channel, this engine has since completely seized up. That's quite a pity really, because it would have been nice to have shown timing up this engine correctly before taking it to bits. Well, in some ways it doesn't entirely matter, because it's going to be stripped apart anyway, but it would be nice to. If you are going to time up one of these engines before stripping it, the best way to do it is to have number 1 4 cylinders at top dead centre, with the distributor rotor arm pointing at number 1 cylinder, and the rockers number 7 and 8 on the rock, so they're just coming on and off on the induction and exhaust stroke, while number 1 cylinder is on the firing stroke. Obviously I can't do that, so we've just got to get on with stripping this engine down. Now then, time to strip this engine down. And yes, I know I'm doing it outside in a bit of a dusty environment, but please don't worry about that. Everything that I'm taking apart is going to be cleaned thoroughly before putting it back together. So the first job is going to be to take apart the rocker shaft, which is these 4 bolts on the top here. Something I will note to people on these Triumph rocker shafts, just a little something to bear in mind, with a engine with low oil pressure, Triumphs are common for this little screw here to come loose and fall out onto the floor or inside the rocker. That can cause you low oil pressure, so just something to watch out for. There's a different bolt on the end there, or not, correct name for it. I wonder why. That's the thing, is when you strip apart engines, you find lots of different bodges over the years that people have done. So that nut will be replaced with one of the correct size, because I won't put back an incorrect nut, even though it's done its job correctly for however many years. I know something about this engine. I do know it was last used in the 1980s, so it hasn't been, as far as I'm aware, run for about 40 odd years, which means that it may have done about 60,000 miles or something like that from new, so not a lot of miles behind this engine. But it's always good to strip them down if they've been sat for a long time, just to have peace of mind, and I want to tighten up this engine no matter what condition it's in. So there we go, that's the rocker shaft out, and as I said, everything's going to be cleaned up, so please don't worry about it going on the floor like what it is here. Now I've got a piece of cardboard here, which is marked up number 1, number 8. These are for the push rods, which you see that oil is so gummy, it's quite literally disgusting. So if nothing else, even if I just done a gasket rebuild on this engine, it would have done it a favour to have stripped it apart regardless, because it's pretty disgusting down there, and that oil is most likely 40 years old, and I don't think no amount of STP is going to clear out all of the crap that's inside that. Now, the exciting bit, cylinder head bolts. And something that's always amazed me, and I'd love to know if anybody's got the answer to this in the comments box down below. Perhaps Triumph had no imagination, but I've always found it strange how cylinder head bolts are curiously very similar torque to wheel nut bolts on Triumphs. Could just be coincidence, but yeah, good practice is to always take apart cylinder heads in the same way that you do them up, which is running in a spiral pattern. You can follow the book way of doing it, but the idea is that as you take it apart, it's the same as putting it back together. It evens out the pressure on things, so you don't warp anything. And I'll tell you what, it's a lot easier doing this in the car as opposed to having to use my own body weight to try and keep everything still. There's no guarantee this cylinder is going to come off. Like everything else on it, it's probably seized up, but we're not going to jinx fate, you know, and say anything just yet. Not going to attempt anything. We're just going to keep beavering away and hope it all comes apart. I just can't believe it's seized up, you know. I've been going out to this engine every now and again, turning it over, and the one time you come to do a video on it and it decides it wants to seize up. Well, never mind. That's one stud that's managed to come out as well there. The worst case scenario is I'm going to have to replace the studs as well, but we'll find out. I could use an impact gun on this, but I'm not gonna. I'm gonna do it the old way, by hand. Or I might give in to an impact gun if it starts getting it too hard. But it seems to be giving up. I don't think an impact gun is necessary. And I will say something about impact tools. When taking apart an engine, okay, if nuts and bolts are that bit too tight, maybe use an impact tool on them. But in general, with engines, hand tools only. I'll tell you what, when you work on modern cars for a living like what I do, and then you work on Triumphs and MGs with pushrod engines at the weekend, you do appreciate how simple these engines are to repair. And to do something like a head gasket on a modern car would take you 4 times the length of time, or 5 times the length of time of doing it with an overhead camshaft and a cam belt, compared to a pushrod engine, which takes you fraction of the time. So just 2 more bolts. Say bolts, I think I'm typical like everybody else. You call bolts washers and washers bolts, and nuts screws and all these sorts of things, but yeah, I think that's the universal language of being a mechanic. So last 2 head nuts. One of my washers is falling down there inside the engine, but I'm not worried about that because it's all coming apart. In actual fact, I think that down there may well be a washer from one of these. There should be another stud there for the rocker cover. I think that's come off of that, if I can fish it out. Oh, nearly. Yep, got it. Just there. Looks about the right sort of size. I'll stick it on there for now. And that's all the head bolts off. Soft faced hammer. Always soft faced hammers with cylinder heads. Don't really like using copper hammers, but mostly soft faced. But this cylinder head looks like it's going to come off. Happy days. Happy days. They don't always come off that easy. So yeah, looking down that, when it's last been used, yeah, it's a bit clouded up in that one, but I think what we'll do, even though this is coming apart and it's going to be re-skimmed and all that, just out of nostalgia, I'm going to stick it on the side there, pour a load of, I'm going to put 4 spark plugs back in, and pour a load of petrol in each one of these here, and just see whether there's any leaks. It doesn't really matter anyway because it's been sent off for skimming and new valves and new guides, but it'd be interesting just to find out. It certainly has some really bad quality coolant in it, so we'll have to clean that out, but I'm surprised how easy that came off. I've got the head gasket just below it, just there. Yeah. Well, it's a copperhead gasket. Now, obviously this engine is seized, so I'm just going to it's the wooden end of the hammer. It might throw things up a little bit. Worth a try. Coming apart anyway. Nope, still seized. And the unfortunate thing is this engine's still got oil in. Let's have a look at this cylinder head anyway. So this is just more curiosity than anything else. I mean, I am sending away the cylinder head for rebuild regardless, but it's a good little test just to see whether the cylinder head is fully sealed. Some may say it's a waste of petrol, but in today's climate where petrol costs an absolute fortune, but it sort of proves a point on whether these are still petrol tight. And on cylinder number 2 and number 4, well certainly number 2 there, it's leaking through like an absolute sieve, so there's no seal on number 2 cylinder, and number 4 is following suit. Number 1 is certainly petrol tight, and number 3 there is going down a little bit. So I could take the valves out, reground them and put them back in, but as I said, I'm sending away the cylinder head for re-engineering and having it converted to unleaded, so that'll future-proof this regardless. But yeah, back to the engine. Now, I was saying about impact tools, it's not always wise to use them on engines, but there's certain areas where you really need to use impact tools because there's no other option. And I'm going to take the flywheel off and the front crankshaft pulley off, and the easiest way to do that is obviously to use an impact tool. I'm just going to fill up these liners here with a little bit of petrol. I mean, oil, petrol, doesn't really matter what you put in, it's just to see if they'll free up the liners there and hopefully make the engine turn over more easy. Worst case scenario, I've just wasted 30p's worth of petrol, but whatever. So front main, you also see whether they're petrol tight as well, so it's got a double test to it on this side. But yeah, the front main, let's come apart nice and easy. And again, back with our soft faced hammer. Let's come apart really easy, so very pleased with that. Everything I'm taking off, I'm putting in the shed out of harm's way. And something I did do before I stored this engine away, I greased the hell out of the flywheel. It's just to stop it rusting up. It's just a shame that the rest of the engine decided to seize. But I wasn't exactly intending on storing this engine for 4 years. I was planning on getting it on the car a bit quicker than that, but these things happen. Life gets in the way. So yeah, 4 bolts on the flywheel, quick tap with the old knocking stick. I would normally turn over the engine, but I can't, just to be able to hit it on the other side. So we're going to struggle a bit here. So I'm going to have to get a tyre lever on the other side. Okay. So there we go, tyre levers in there. We can then go back to just teasing it out a little at a time. It is coming. And there we go, one flywheel. As I said, I greased it up before I put it away into storage, just so it doesn't rust and corrode. It kind of helps me a little bit with the rebuild, but yeah, I think next we'll concentrate our efforts on the timing chain. Now, the front of the engine, these nuts and bolts are supposed to go in a set way, but I'm not too worried about that because I've got all the manuals I need to tell me which order I need to put them back in, so that's not going to be too much of an issue for me. But if you don't know, then be wary that there's a mixture of screws like that for a screwdriver, and there's bolts and nuts that go on these timing covers. So if you don't know, it's another good idea to get a bit of cardboard out and put them in, as I'm pretty confident with these engines. I'm not too worried myself, because I know I'll put them in back in the right order. But it is good practice again to put stuff back the way you found it, and it's good practice, I suppose, really, to have a little bit of cardboard if you're unsure. But yeah, as I said earlier, don't tempt fate, Steve, but it doesn't seem to be causing too many issues, this engine. It seems to be coming apart reasonably well, apart from the fact that it's seized. It's coming apart reasonably well. I've never heard this engine run. As I say, when I first got the engine, it was in a Triumph Spitfire that was, let's say, beyond economical repair, that I ended up breaking for its parts. And usually I like to, if I've got a car like that, it's a curiosity inside me that likes to see if I can get an engine running as a one last hurrah. But this one, I didn't tend to bother. I just ripped it out with its gearbox, which now its overdrive gearbox lives in my Spitfire, and soon that car's diff will live in my Spitfire, and same with this engine. So there's more of the donor car that lives in my current Spitfire than what does of my current Spitfire, apart from the number plates. But yeah. And I mean, I'll clean all this up in future videos, and you'll see me do this and paint it all up, and it will all look, hopefully, I'd say reconditioned, not new, more refurbished than new, but it'll look nice when it goes back in the Spitfire. Well, just looking down the bores of all those pistons where I put the fuel in, none of them have lost any fuel whatsoever, so it would have been interesting to see if this engine did actually start, but that's too late now. So there we go, that's the it's stuck on its dowel down at the bottom, and it has got a simplex on it, which I'm not entirely surprised about. That's going to be changed for a duplex timing chain as opposed to a simplex. A very easy and simple upgrade to do. Well worth doing for any Spitfire owner. Yeah, let's get the camshaft out next. Right, so again, if I'd been able to time up this engine, you would have been able to mark this drive cog here, but unfortunately I can't. I'm quite glad it's just come out like that, so that's good news. Put that to one side, and then with my only magnet that I've got, hopefully the followers are going to play ball. They might not, because if they've been in there a while and my magnet's not very strong. So what we might do is, if we take the chain off this side, and let's see if we can turn over the camshaft by itself, just see if we can free them up, and hopefully, if they're not seized in, I'll free them up enough for the magnet to be able to pull them out, and then we can pull the camshaft out. So let's give that a try. So just got to break these little tab washers back. And I guess this hasn't been apart since it was built by Triumph in 1967, I think this engine was built. So some over 50 years, or we guess. It may have been, who knows. But yeah, it's unfortunate that it is seized, otherwise I could time this engine up and you guys would benefit from that, but as I say, it is seized and there's not a lot I can do about that. But obviously when it comes to building it, we will have to time it up there anyway. So I can show you that as I build it. So there's the camshaft. So we'll put the nuts back in. And what I'm hoping is, if it's not seized, maybe, yes, it's not seized at all. Excellent, excellent. So as that can turn nice and freely, we might be able to try and lift out the followers. Yep. It's not the most ideal way of getting them out, but my magnet's not very strong, so we've just got to use what we've got. And the same with the push rods. The followers need to be taken out in order and put down in order. Like I said earlier, please don't worry about this being outside and mucky and all that, because this engine's not going to be built up like this. It's only a case of it's like this for now until I build it. Everything will be cleaned thoroughly before I build the engine, so don't worry about it. So hopefully the magnet just is not strong enough whatsoever to lift out these followers. I really ought to get another magnet. But certainly the ones that I'm moving, I might have a bit more luck with trying to get them out. It's going to be very difficult to get the camshaft out if I can't get the followers out. I might end up turning the engine on its side and dragging them out. There you go, there's another one. So I suppose really it's wise that I ought to work in the order that are coming out. I'll look on that one next, because I know that's next to that one. I'll put them down on the floor over there so I know where they go. Yep, that's come out really nicely. So you're next to you. That one's there. That's the last one, that end. We've got 3 more to go. There we go. And just 2 more to go, and then we get the camshaft out. Now, I have got a better magnet, but it's unfortunately at my place of employment rather than at my home, so hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I probably should have brought it back here to have done this. But there we go. So they're all out, all the followers in the correct order, and same as the push rods, I'll label them up. I'll probably put numbers on them, just mark numbers straight on the side, and they can go away until it comes to time to rebuild. But let's get the camshaft out. So now, another magic moment. If all goes to plan, I'll just get this timing gear off. And the keeper plate. And then, hopefully, just tease carefully, the camshaft should come out. There we go. There we go. One Triumph Spitfire Mk3 FD series camshaft, and just visually looking at it, it doesn't actually look like it's in that bad a condition at all. Right, let's get the crankshaft out. So we'll start by taking the front engine plate off. And that'll just get rid of all this gubbins at the front. And again, as we do this, we'll be cleaning this all up so it'll look all nice and fresh when it comes to putting it all back together. I always find it amazing with Spitfire engines how they just are miniaturised versions of 2 less cylinders, but just miniaturised versions of TR6 engines. I think Triumph really did think about their design as they evolved the Triumph Herald engine to the Vitesse engine in the 2000 and all the way up to the TR6. so I won't be putting on lightened alley plates. Some people do, but I want to stick with the steel ones. They're a lot heavier, but I don't intend on going hell for leather with this car. It's got enough performance for what I want, and I'm happy with this being pretty standard. There are plenty of Mk3 Spitfires out there, I know, so it's not like it's a rare car, but we're all different. And we all have our own ideas about how we want our cars to be. It's not to say I don't appreciate cars that have been modified. I do. I just like mine being standard. So there we go, that's the front plate off. Put the bolts to one side for that, and we can turn around the engine. Now if you was doing a clutch on one of these and you had a rear main oil seal and you're doing this in situ, this is the rear engine plate you'd have to take off. And something worth noting is at the top one of these, certainly on a TR6, there's maybe a copper washer on this horseshoe plate here, not on these. These are just ordinary spring washers behind these bolts. The rear engine plate. But yeah, on these bolts coming round here for the rear main oil seal, the top one there should be, I would imagine it definitely is, given this engine is, as far as I'm aware, has never been apart, but you don't know the history of things. It could have been apart at some point. It should have a copper washer on the top one. This is not going to come off anyway because I've got to undo two of the sump bolts, and the engine's wanting to nose forward, so let's let it nose forward. Oh, and there goes all the oil. I'm not too concerned, it's only my drive, it's only my patio, it'll wash away later. The oil's got to come out of it anyway. Trying to catch as much as what I can, but I've got no way of lifting up this engine, so it's unfortunate. And would you look at that? The copper washer has been put in that one instead of on the top one, and I've got oil going out all over my patio. said, not too worried about that because I can clean it up later after we've got this engine in bits. The colour of that oil is absolute black as anything, so yeah, wouldn't have done it much favours running it. I would have liked to have catched some of that oil, but I disposed of it in a proper manner. But as I say, I will clean it up. Now hopefully, all being well, the rear main should just come out. Famous last words. I think we're going to wait till we get the sump off, so it's going to mean draining what remains of the oil inside the engine, even though most of it is now all over my patio. Well, I think that's most of the oil out of this engine, but there might be a bit more. I don't really know. There's certainly going to be a bit of spillage of the petrol coming out, but I've got no other way of draining this engine other than trying to put it on its side and just hoping for the best that I have taken out most of the oil. There's going to be some more that comes out anyway, but the sump's going to come off regardless, and you're going to find there's going to be oil pouring out from the bottom no matter what I do, so you just got to grit your teeth and accept it. So yeah, the next stage is to get the sump off so that we can get the con rods out and then push the pistons up. Hopefully then we'll have a stripped out engine. Of course that rear main didn't want to come off as it was, and I don't want to force anything. If it doesn't want to come off, I'd rather take off plates elsewhere to let things come off gently. That's one thing about engines, you've got to be gentle with them here and there. Let's not get my mat covered too much in the oil. Instead, even if you drained an engine, you would still get oil coming out of it. It's just inevitable. So there's no point crying about it, you just got to get on with it. But yeah, when I took this engine out, it was about 4 years ago now, and I turned it over every now and again and hoped for the best, and unfortunately it must have seized up over the last year or so, probably over this last winter, which is a bit of a shame really, but my intention has always been to rebuild this engine and put it in the Spitfire. So it'll be a good little engine once it's done. And it'll be the right engine in the right car. Right, let's, here's where we get a load more oil coming out. Yep. You're getting the awkward bolt first, the rear one. If you work on engines like this, it'd be so much easier. You think, last time you saw me taking off a sump was on videos, was on my own Spitfire, and of course it was lying on my back underneath the car, sitting next to a sump. It's so much easier. But yeah, there's certain components I might just swap over from one engine to the other, and such as this sump, I might not even bother reconditioning this. I might just use the one out of the current Spitfire, because I did spend a bit of time redressing that sump and making it nice. Certainly the distributor will come off of the current engine and various other components, but we'll see how we get on. There we go. It's very gunky and horrible, but we'll put some bolts in with it, keep everything together. So the next job is just get this front ceiling block out. I'm going to be replacing this front ceiling block regardless. It's a known weak spot of a Triumph. You always tend to get oil coming out of the front of these engines, don't matter how many times you try and seal them up. But yeah, we'll be fitting a new ceiling block. Well, I say that, it actually doesn't look in too bad a condition, but we'll see. Getting rid of the dipstick. The oil strainer doesn't seem to have a filter on the end of it for the oil pump. That's interesting. Makes you wonder whether this engine has had an oil starvation problem in the past, but not to worry, it's going to get a new oil pump no matter what. It might even have the oil pump raided out of the current engine. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but this pump certainly ain't going to be going back in this engine, let's say that. This will be put on the scrap yard. So that will be definite goodbye. Now obviously we can take the crank out, that's not going to be too much of an issue. At the moment we've got the pistons that are stuck down in the bores, that's what's stopping it from turning, so I'm hoping I'm going to do this a way I don't particularly like doing it, but I don't think we've got much choice in the matter, and that's to crack off the big end bearing, the big end shells bearings. Yeah, there we go. We'll do these two first and push them out. we go. That's one. So this is number 2 piston. That's one of its shells just there. Actually not in that bad a condition. Now the next bit, I do not recommend in the slightest doing this, but there's no other way of doing it, and I am getting new pistons in this engine. So as the engine is seized, I'm only hitting on the top of the piston head, and it is coming out, so that's good news. Slowly. It's certainly higher. It just doesn't want to go past the crank, because obviously the crank's at a certain angle, so that's good news there anyway, because if we can free up the other ones, then happy days. So any engineers watching this will be absolutely horrified with the way I'm taking those pistons out, but as I am saying here, the pistons are being replaced. If I wasn't replacing the pistons, I'll be a lot more gentle about it, and it is a seized engine, so there's certain areas where you've got to know where you can be a little bit more brutal. So that's number 3. We'll put those down in the right order we take them out. This is number 4. Number 1. Unfortunately I get a swan neck in there, so it'd be so much easier if this engine wasn't seized. These things are sent to Triumph, and Triumph they certainly do. So I think we're going to change our plan of attack a little bit with taking out these pistons so they don't whack into the sidewall too much, and I think what we're going to do is undo the 6 bolts of the crankshaft and then pull the crankshaft towards us to get it out. Right, so we've got the rear main here, but that shouldn't make too much odds to us because the bolts on it are all loose anyway, and there you go, it's just dropped out, so that's all good. And if we just undo, there's 6 bolts. Hold the crankshaft in place. On the main bearings. Then that'll make life a lot easier. Certainly now we've got the big end caps off, we're taking the pistons out. Just notice I'm loosening it off just a little at a time on all of them so it comes apart without distorting too much. And again, I'll put these caps in order so that we don't confuse things when we go to put it back together. Even though I am having the crankshaft reground, it's still good practice, and I am using new shells as well. It's good practice to put stuff back the way that you took it apart. Now that's interesting, there's no spring washer on this one, so this engine has been apart at some point, because there would be a spring washer on every big end bearing. Which again reassures me when taking it to bits. Yeah, that at least I know when I go to put it back together, it's going to be put back together correctly. Right. There we go. The crankshaft. Now the last bit is to get these seized pistons out, and as I said earlier, I tried to go a bit cheeky with it and see if I could get them out without taking the crankshaft out first, but I don't think they wanted to know. As I said, I am only whacking on the piston head itself, because that's what's being replaced in this engine. So certainly that's 2 coming through. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, other than being seized, they don't actually look in that bad a condition. So that's piston number 1. I'll label them all up as I've done with the big end bearings the other end. A little bit of white paint. And again, when you take apart engines, it's always good to just number up everything as you go through it all. I know I've not been showing much of that on camera as I've been doing it, but believe you me, I have been numbering up stuff as I've been taking it apart, and I highly recommend it. I mean, if you can get one of these little Tipex pens, they are great for numbering things up. So like just 1 there for cylinder, piston number 1, 2, 3, and 4. I think the minimal this engine needs is certainly a new set of piston rings, but it's getting new pistons in it regardless, because I don't know when this engine was last used, and I want this engine to be nice and tight when I use it. But that's pretty much it. That's the bare engine block. There is a few little other things on it, like the water tap, which I'll take off camera because it's only unscrewing that, you know, and a few other little nuts and bolts. But there we have it, one bare engine block. Well, I hope you've enjoyed watching me strip apart this engine down to its bare bones, and I know there are a few other little bits that need taking off this engine before it can be sent off for engineering, such as the head studs taken out and a few other little ancillaries around the engine, but the basics of it are there. But moving forward with this project, the engine and the cylinder head are going to be sent off for engineering. When they come back, we're going to start cleaning it up, then we're going to paint it, and then episode by episode we're going to start building up this engine bit by bit. So it won't be one big episode like today's episode has been with stripping the engine. It'll be part by part as I build up this engine. But anyway guys, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.